Okay, so this is the pendulum that you'll be using in your experiments. Hopefully you've learned about the pendulum a little bit in class, but let's relate what you've learned in class to how this one works. There's a mass at the bottom, which we use a bowling ball here. We actually have two separate ones, so in the experiment, you'll test what happens when you change the masses. This right here is the locking mechanism, so without permission from your teacher, don't touch the lock here. It's connected to a rope, and the rope goes all the way up to a fulcrum point at the very top of the ceiling. So in your experiments, you'll be using three specific numbers. You'll be using numbers for the mass, which is the bowling ball, numbers for the length, which is from where you just saw on the ceiling, right where the wooden box started, to the very center of the bowling ball. That's called the length. And you'll also be using an angle of displacement, which will be explained later in the lab. But just so you know, the angle is what is made from where you just saw the pendulum in the very center to the new point. So that's an angle right there. And just so you can see it, it's from the center to where the bowling ball is here. The test that we'll be showing you today, just showing you how to use it and everything, we'll be using a sample. So we'll be using a sample angle, which is the middle angle, and we'll be using a certain length that is the length associated with hook 2. So if you look over to the wall, go ahead, you'll see the 3 hooks, 1, 2, and 3. Those can be changed so that eventually the length will be changed to the bowling ball, and we can explain that later. Okay, so the basic concept of the pendulum lab is that you'll drop the pendulum a certain amount of times, and you'll be able to record how long it takes from the pendulum to get from the dropping site, swing where it's normally going to swing, and go back to the original dropping site. That's called one oscillation. So you're going to record the time it takes, and that'll be detailed later in the lab. But for now, I'm going to show you exactly how to measure and find where you're going to drop the ball from. The bowling ball is also called a ball, by the way. So you're going to need more than one person on this, and that's also detailed in the lab. But what will happen is, previously in the lab, you'll calculate some numbers, and one of the numbers you'll calculate is a x distance. And that x distance is the distance from, there's a little burnt mark on the ground below the bowling ball, to wherever your distance is. So that'll be measured previously, and we already actually took the measurements for one of the sample angles. So for most of the lab, your angle is going to be the same. So you can just have it set up and drop from the same point every time. But eventually you'll have to change them, and that's also explained in the lab. So the main point in dropping it is you need to pull your measuring tape out to where the X is, leave it on the ground, and then instead of a chair here, there'll be a person. So one of you will come on this side and hold the angle measuring board up. And then depending on which angle it is, angle 1, 2, or 3, mostly you'll be using angle 2, you're going to pull it back to the height, specific height. So because we're using angle 2 and x2, we're going to be using y2. So y stands for height and x stands for width. So when you drop it, all you have to do is make sure that the center of mass of the bowling ball, so if you picture like a dot in the very center of it, is going to be at the certain distance away from the center you want it and at a certain height. So if you can see here, the center of my mass is at the height y2, and it's over where I marked on the measuring tape. And then what you're going to want to do is drop it specifically from that height and do not push it. So all you have to do is, whoever's dropping it, there's going to be one person dropping it, one person timing, and one person holding the angle board. Whoever's dropping, just let your hands fall to the side and take a step back after you drop it. So that's what it looked like dropped, and that's one oscillation. So this would be 2 oscillations. And the way the lab is set up, you're going to time it for a specific amount of time, and then you'll use those calculations for time later in the lab to find out some interesting things also about gravity, the pendulum.